A shroud of darkness blankets the world. Smoke and brimstone spews from the yawning gates of Inferno, enveloping the lands where people have abandoned God and openly wage war against his creation. It is a grim reality that a full third of humanity has bent its knee before the idols of hell. The main satanic military force on Earth are the Heretic Legions, raised from amongst these citizens of the damned. Spies are sent into Hell's domains under special absolution by the Cardinal Protector. Most are caught, never to be seen again, save for some whose eternally screaming heads are returned to New Antioch, branded with the bleeding ruins that mock the Holy Trinity. Yet some do make it back to the light, whispering of the horrors they have witnessed, of firstborn cast into the mouths of the burning statues of Baal and human flesh sold by the pound in dreadful markets. They speak of the great idols of the golden calf and rapturous men and women who prostrate themselves before them, carving layers of their own flesh in ecstatic offering. Inverted pyramids and towers plunge into the depths of these cities, built of iron and blackened stone. Within these pits stand sacrificial altars, where weeping captives are slowly sliced to death over agonizing days and weeks with wicked knives made of infernal basalt. Cathedrals to the princes of hell hang from great arches of volcanic stone, while condemned are crucified on hundreds of upside-down crosses. Accounts speak of sprawling factories made of mutilated flesh and metal, their forges yielding endless munitions for the ongoing war. Guided by the teachings of Tartarus's smiths, alchemists toil over colossal weapons and armored behemoths, wielding the forbidden secrets of their patron's metallurgy to forge instruments of death and suffering beyond the grasp of any human engineer. Once proud cities of earth, where churches have been toppled and entire populations are now dedicated towards bringing down the very throne of heaven. Amongst the forsaken citizens that endure within the earthly domains of hell, the greatest status is afforded to the soldiers fighting in the Great War. But joining the army of damnation is no easy task. Those who wish to win a place amongst the Heretic Legions must make an unholy pilgrimage to the burning bronze gates of hell, where, even from leagues away, the infernal heat sears both flesh and spirit until the pain becomes unbearable. In the Valley of Tears, the great road that leads to the gate, paved as it is with wailing sounds and lamentations, is littered with endless mounds of charred bodies. Many are still half alive, writhing in agony, trapped in a grotesque twilight between life and death, their wickedness deemed insufficient. These discarded souls are doomed to writhe in agony until the day of judgment. Those who make it within sight of Hell's maw are considered worthy, and are initiated into the legions, taking unbreakable vows that chain them into darkness for all eternity, their bodies branded with the mark of the Devil Lord that has claimed them. Armories of hell then equip them for battle, and heretic priests beckon forth new supplicants as dictated by the whispers of their patron archdevils. Thus a new heretic legionnaire is born. They hail archdevils as their masters, and are thus damned for all eternity. Yet there are some who push further on, to the very gate itself and beyond. Their very flesh ignites, never to recover, but those with the blackest souls can enter Inferno itself. Amongst those, the anointed are especially revered amongst the legions. They are the paragons of unhinged brutality, men and women of colossal vigour and unyielding devotion. Having tread the accursed path to the shores of the lake of eternal flame, where the damned wither and contort in ceaseless torment, the anointed emerge forever scarred by the embrace of abyssal fires. The blackened and burnt flesh of the anointed will never heal, but in exchange they are granted the right to wear heavy Gehenna armor, and they gain strength to wield weapons that a normal man could barely lift. It is said that glancing into their eyes can see the reflection of the very flames of hell, forever etched in their vision. Yet, some who witness go even further in their depraved devotion. Suicide is a mortal sin and one eagerly embraced by many. Most cry out for devils to notice their final sacrifice in vain, as the infernal nobles are capricious, and delight in betraying their own as much as their enemies. But those with truly wicked and depraved souls are resurrected in contempt of the Redeemer, coming back as choristers, horrific mockeries of creation whose severed heads sing unholy hymns praising the devil, their voices causing the ears of their enemies to bleed. Though the vast bulk of the Heretic Legions are made of mortal humans, Hell often sends their own abhorrent progeny to reinforce their mortal foot soldiers, nightmarish war beasts made of captured and possessed creatures, dreaded artillery witches who act as mobile artillery supporting lightning assaults. Thus, in this cursed theatre of war, mortals and abominations march hand in withering hand, bound by the suffering ties of damnation. The wails of tortured beasts meld with the shrieks of damned souls, while the skies rain down fiery retribution upon all who dare to oppose the heretics' ceaseless crusade for a demented parody with their creator. From a very early age, a select group of heretic youth are sent beyond the gates of hell to be raised as death commandos. Few are chosen, and few return, but those who complete their training stand amongst the most elite of the Heretic Legions. Barracked in the seventh circle of Inferno, they are taught the deadly arts of assassination by the damned souls of the greatest killers and murderers who now reside in hell. Here, they undergo brutal training, mastering the use of all manner of weapons and poisons, and they are schooled in martial skills by the personal guard of the archdevil Beleth. They learn to slither as serpents through the battlefield, leaving murder in their wake. Their specially forged Tartarus claws are quenched in the waters of the river Styx, a source of poison more potent than any mortal venom. Many carry silenced pistols to take down targets unseen and unheard. Aside from their weapons, the Death Commandos are equipped with stealth generators that operate by diffracting light, utilizing the heart of an innocent and infernal technologies that hide them from the eyes of God. Once their training is complete, the Death Commandos emerge from the abyss as silent spectres of carnage. Of the heretic troops fighting in the trenches of the Great War, the Death Commandos are the most feared by the faithful. Most infamous in the ranks are three master Death Commandos, Cain, Barabbas, and Haman, who simultaneously assassinated the Supreme Pontiff, the High Prophetess Aelia, and the Holy Roman Emperor in the year of 1894. This threw church forces into turmoil and allowed the Heretic Legions to launch a lightning offensive across the Levant and Europe. The tongues of the Death Commandos are ceremoniously ripped out at the end of their training. They will never speak of what they have learned, and their unnerving silence adds to their sinister reputation. They communicate with each other with a complex system of inscrutable hand signals. From a young age, all heretics are taught that God Tyrant Yahweh demands obedience, but there are always brave souls who chafe at the yoke of divine oppression. In their bitter rage, these dauntless ones commit a form of ritual suicide to spit in the despot's eye, knowing they have not the strength to injure him apart from this little rebellion. Suicide is a mortal sin, and sacrificing yourself to the glory of hell is a yet greater affront to God. Some heretics born with a gift of sonorous voice but little prospect of rising through the ranks. Those possessing a determination to excel nevertheless may pursue the dark path of becoming a chorister. Such supplicants go to one of the black altars of heretic abodes at the bottom of the deep inverted pyramid temples dedicated to the greatest of archdevils. There they are dressed in the robes of dark devotion, lie on the altar and mutilate themselves to death by carving unholy runes into their flesh. The more wounds they can suffer before perishing, the more pleasing it is said their offering is. The most devout slice their own throats, trying to cut as deep as they can before their miserable life leaves them. Most such wretches go to their doom in the lake of fire, but some are reborn as choristers after 9 days. Their corpses lurch back to their feet and finish their grisly beheading, lift their severed heads, and begin to sing hymns that they learned in the Inferno. From their self-inflicted wounds spurts cold blood that forms diabolic symbols and changes to match the words of their unholy chorale. They head towards the front lines, driven by a call no living can hear, and join the heretic warband of their choosing. As their severed heads sing their agonizing hymns, the minds of their enemies are filled with visions from the pits of hell, weakening both the resolve and strength of those unfortunate enough to hear the dire song of a chorister. Their hymns are often the first thing a fresh recruit experiences on the battlefield, as their unholy voice rolls across the trenches, proclaiming a never-ending prophecy for the final victory of hell over heaven. The great military hospice of New Antioch has a separate wing for those who have never recovered from hearing choristers' dirge, their minds forever lost in a vision of eternal damnation, tied to their iron frame beds, screaming of the world to come when all is covered under darkness lit only by eternal flames. Epidemics of typhus, malaria, typhoid, smallpox, yellow fever, pneumonia, trench fever, Marquesian disease, and countless others ravaged the trenches and battlefields of the Great War, but they all pale in comparison to most dreaded of them all, the Black Grail. Beelzebub, the Lord of Flies, stands apart from the other Lords of Hell, who act mainly through their mortal followers. Instead, when he periodically gains supremacy in the bitter power struggles of the Archfiends, he sends forth his deadliest curse. Infused with demonic essence from the bowels of the seventh layer of Hell, where the putrid fortress of Beelzebub stands, spews forth a torrent of demonic hellflies, scorpions, locusts, and other infernal insects. The Hellgate opens and a veritable tidal wave of foulness emerges, flowing across the land at startling speed, consuming everything and leaving indescribable horror in its wake. After 9 days, the insect swarm exhausts itself, devouring its own in its insatiable hunger. The Black Grail is indiscriminate in its hatred of all living things. Its infections can spread to virtually any living biological matter, which bursts forth with tumours, boils, and weeping pustules. Puddles and ponds of melted flesh are left in its wake, endless mouths left screaming in their agony, for the Black Grail destroys the body but leaves the mind intact to suffer. The scientists, priests of the church, and the alchemists of the Sultanate fervently look for a way to inoculate their people against this foulest of diseases, but thus far they are without success. The only answer is to burn the infected settlements with specially constructed flamethrower tanks that use holy anointing oil as the fuel for their weapons. But if this is not done, or the countermeasures are too late, what happens next is even worse. Bodies of men, horses, dogs, insects, and other animals of every kind that are infected by the Black Grail lurch to their feet, driven by a demonic will. Not living, not dead, they become vessels to spread the corruption of their master ever further, forming warbands that strive to find and infect life of any kind. They also gather things that mortals value and bring this loot as well as grisly trophies to the feet of the idols of Beelzebub they erect. Thus, the cult of the Black Grail mocks the devotions of the faithful and their prayers. At the head of such warbands stand the Knight of the Order of the Fly, those most depraved men and women who willingly embrace the Black Grail and whose devotion Beelzebub finds sufficient. They are granted weapons, armour, and equipment corrupted by the hand of the Archfiend in exchange for sacrifices brought to the altars of Beelzebub, which these warbands build wherever they go. Objects of grisly horror, constructed from the remains of their victims shaped into the form of monstrous flies. The polluting effect of the Black Grail is the gift of Beelzebub, Lord of the Flies. Spread by the insects bred by his own hand in the seventh layer of Hell, it is a tidal wave of his foulness in the form of demonic vermin, septicemia, tainted insects, plague, and impurities that pollute both body and soul. Entire villages and towns are turned into half-living slush that bubbles on the ground, an agony of melted flesh quivering and crying at the multitudinous diseases granted by the Lord of the Flies. Those caught by the Black Grail are still aware of the horrible fate that has befallen them. Specialized units of New Antioch and the Free State of Prussia are dedicated to responding to these outbreaks with heavy flamethrower tanks using holy anointing oil as their fuel. But some victims of the Black Grail suffer a far worse fate. They are bestowed with the Black Honor by being melded with hellflies, growing into a grotesque winged insect made of bloated flesh. After this torturous metamorphosis, they take to the air as heralds of Beelzebub, the winged squires and scouts of the Order of the Fly. Their vestigial human bodies are still conscious as they are slowly eaten from within to be used as fuel by the herald. All the while, their warped bodies fight for the glory of hell against their will. The heralds are the vanguard of any assault of the Black Grail, and the ear-numbing drone of their wings strikes terror in any defender, breaking their focus and sapping their willpower. Heralds wield discarded weapons contaminated with horrible worms that churn through them, which in turn infect their victims. Each diseased bullet has sentience of its own, finding even the smallest chink in the armor, burrowing into the nervous system and liquefying the internal organs from within. When the tide of the Black Grail comes, many mortals cry out to Beelzebub in their despair, hoping that the Lord of the Flies would spare them in their exchange for worship and servitude. But their prayers fall on deaf ears, for the Prince of Gehenna hates all creation and only wishes to warp it into a form pleasing to himself and hateful to God. But there are few mortals, exceedingly rare, who truly share the vision of Beelzebub and wish the world to end in a putrid, parasite-infested mass, eternally writhing in the throes of the endless plagues bestowed upon them by the Black Grail. Many of them are secret and highly skilled killers, men and women whose pleasure is to murder repeatedly, plying their craft in secret, wishing one day to do it openly. From amongst such twisted individuals, the most depraved are inducted into the ranks of the unholy Order of the Fly, known as Plague Knights. When the Black Grail comes, they come out calmly and welcome the wave of corruption, not consumed by it, but rather warped into a cadaver-like creature halfway between life and death. They retain sentience, intelligence, and a dim memory of their past lives, making them extremely useful at leading the Black Grail into the isolated farmsteads and remote settlements that might otherwise escape the clutches of Beelzebub. The more living creatures a Black Knight can find and warp beyond recognition, the higher they will climb in the ranks of the Order of the Fly, and the greater the favour they will find in the eyes of Beelzebub. Amongst their rank there are 12 Plague Knights of great renown, made in mockery of the paladins of the church, great champions of the Fly. They dwell within Ekron, the city of Beelzebub, a place of such wilting horror that none dare to approach it, not even the mightiest of Heretic lords. But sometimes the orders of their lord come to their ears, and then the mightiest of Plague Knights strike forth, following orders carried out by the deafening buzz of trillions of beating wings of hellflies.